The Radio Wammo Breakfast.
Suckling on the teat of tech.
With Paul Brislen.
Yeah, talking high-tech stories of the week, and there certainly has been a few. G'day there, Paul.
Good morning, how are you?
Good, very good, thank you. First up, of course, would have to be the cyber war, cyber attacks of WikiLeaks.
Cyber war. Dom, dom, dom.
It's all on, isn't it?
Yes. You're hiding in your bunker, keeping your head down?
I was trying to get to MasterCard and Visa yesterday. I don't know why. I just thought, I need to go there to sign up, and you can... Yeah, just to check.
That's what we call a manual distributed denial of service attack, where everybody goes to have a look.
Yeah.
And discovers you can't see anything because it's down because everybody's having a look.
Well, that's right. I got the page time out.
Yeah, which is quite remarkable, really, for a site that sort of size. But this is all off the back of the WikiLeaks schmozzle. Is it a schmozzle? It might be a diatribe, actually. Could be just about anything.
It's a cluster something.
It absolutely is, but I'll leave you to say that on there. Yes. It is, so WikiLeaks, of course, has put out all of these U.S. State Department cables that were supposed to remain confidential, despite them being shared with, 2.5 million classified clearance people. So the leaks have started. WikiLeaks has got them out there. Julian Assange, who runs WikiLeaks, has been arrested on what looked like quite bizarre charges. He's now been... I think he's been extradited, or he's still fighting extradition back to Sweden. And in the meantime, a group called Anonymous, that purveyor of all things Anonymous, have decided that they will enact revenge on his behalf and start taking on some of these companies who have refused to not just support WikiLeaks, but actually actively try to stop them from doing what they do.
Stop providing services.
MasterCard and Visa, and PayPal, who have stopped accepting transactions, donations, in effect, from individuals. Now, to me, this is quite astonishing. I mean, here they must be coming under intense pressure from somebody, and I would suspect the U.S. government, because this is totally a freedom of speech issue. I disagree probably 90% with what he's done, Julian Assange, but I would happily stand up on the bastions of free speech to defend his right to do it. I don't agree with anything Paul Henry says on the television, but I'd be damned if I'd allow anybody to say, no, you can't say that. This is purely a freedom of speech issue, and they've crossed a line somewhere. Ironically, it's the home of freedom of speech, the United States of America, which is crossing the line.
Yeah, now Amazon is saying that they weren't approached by any government officials specifically, but they had seen the letter that had gone to WikiLeaks to say that what you're doing is illegal.
Yeah.
And then what happens at that point, of course, all the legal teams from these various organisations freak out, and because they want to protect the company's interests, and they want to make sure that nothing that the company is doing is going to affect the whole business.
Exactly.
So
and so if you let your legal team run the business, this is what happens. And if you let the accountant run your business, then you never invest in anything. And that's why we have executives, so that they can say, actually, no, this is bigger than just our own personal interest. This is a matter of international importance.
But what do you make of Anonymous's actions in doing these cyber attacks?
Well, this is one of the sort of standard issue geek responses, isn't it? Is to lash out and to have a crack at anybody they see as being an enemy of freedom. I'd much rather we just actually talk about these things. The U.S. government was doing enough damage on its own simply by being so strident and noisy about this kind of thing, when it turned out that most of the cables were quite banal and quite pointless. The American Bruce Schneier, who's a security expert, has quite a nice blog post on this, and I'll tweet that out shortly if I can get to my computer, get the kids off it. But he says, look, the real problem here starts much further back in the food chain, with the Americans giving access to 2.5 million people to be able to read these things. Your defense, your security is only as good as the weakest link, and there's no vetting process. There doesn't appear to be any logging process. Some fairly basic, fundamental things. If these things are so secret, they should be secured. And the Americans haven't even bothered doing that, and then they get upset when these things come out.
Yeah.
So I think there's a lot of blame that could be laid. But what the Anonymous group is doing is making it they've escalated it to another level where now people can feel outrage at the kind of things they're doing. You know, taking on the likes of Visa and MasterCard and trying to knock off their business processes at this time of year when clearly it's incredibly busy is really just going to upset the punters, the people you want on your side.
Yeah.
Rather than awakening them to the outrage, you'll just awaken them to the fact that they can't buy their Christmas presents.
There was an attempt on Amazon this morning, but that has failed apparently.
Yeah. Well, you know, we've had Slashdot, the grandfather of these kinds of things, out many years ago. Slashdot's a website that all the geeks used to read, and they would point to a story and say, "Hey, check this out." And it would crash that story, the server hosting the story, because every geek on the planet would go and have a look. And this is, in effect, a denial of service attack. So a long time ago, IT managers and system administrators got quite smart about doing what you're supposed to do, which is, distributing your content so that you can always be up.
Exactly.
That's what the Internet's for. So, it's a little bit childish, and I think it was unnecessary. That's the worst part of it. It muddies the waters too much. This was quite a clear-cut case. The Americans were pressuring a bunch of commercial operations into not allowing WikiLeaks to be supported, and that's abhorrent.
All right, now let's look at this open letter to the government on copyright that Juha Saarinen has just blogged on, I'm guessing, Computer World?
Over on Geekzone.
Over
at the Techsploder blog on Geekzone, geekzone.co.nz. If you have a look, this is a letter from a variety of individuals and IT organisations, the Open Source Society, for instance, Internet NZ, a couple of their people are in there as well. Basically, it's an open letter about the new look copyright bill that's going through the process at the moment. This one, they'd introduced one just before the last election. The previous government had introduced one, and it had a particularly nasty section in it that allowed basically the ISP to cut you off if you infringe on somebody else's copyright copyright holdings, and it also allowed for the copyright holders to basically send out a letter saying, no, you've breached my copyright, and never have to prove anything. So the new bill includes three areas that are very similar to this. Section 122 MA, which when you read it says the burden of proof actually lies with the defendant. So rather than the copyright holders having to prove that you breached their copyright, the way it's worded, it says you have to prove that you didn't. So I, copyright holder of the word spam, accuse you, Wammo, on the radio of breaching my copyright, and I demand that you pay me $500 million or I will go to your ISP and have you disconnected from the Internet.
Blimey.
Now, go ahead and prove that you haven't.
But I didn't. I didn't do it.
No, where's the proof?
What?
Where's the proof? Right, I'll see you in court.
Oh.
Even if you get to court and it then gets thrown out, you personally have incurred a huge amount of expense proving that you haven't done anything wrong. Now, that's just backwards. I'm sorry. That's 17th century London law coming to the fore at its finest there. So no, that one's got to go. So these guys have laid out the areas in quite a nice, concise way, quite a common sense approach to it, and said, look, this is why we think that's wrong. And they've also had a good look at account holder liability, because you get things like, who is the account holder? Is it a library? Is it a public library? And somebody's come in and used the Wi-Fi connection. Yeah. Well, are you going to shut down the library? Apparently so, under this law. Universities would be the same. Anybody who offers free access to the Internet is suddenly liable for anything that anybody does with the Internet whilst they're connected to it. So that becomes quite an issue.
Yeah. All right, well, people can view that letter up at geekzone.co.nz. You can follow the links on the front page there.
That's right.
Thanks very much, Paul.
Anytime.
Talk to you next week.
Excellent.
Paul Brislen there, on Twitter as well, twitter.com/Paul Brislen.